Sophia Hayes had mastered the art of invisibility. At 36, she glided through life like a shadow, present but unnoticed, brilliant but deliberately unremarkable. The small community library where she worked in Oakwood Heights was her perfect camouflage. A place where people saw exactly what she wanted them to see. Just another mild-mannered librarian, with her hair pulled back in a practical bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. No one who came to check out books or use the research computers gave a second thought to the woman who organized community reading programs with quiet efficiency. The same woman who could navigate any aviation system ever built, who had flown missions in airspace where American aircraft officially never existed, and who could identify the make and model of any military aircraft by sound alone. Sophia's apartment above Riverside Bookstore reflected her carefully constructed persona, minimalist, organized, and revealing nothing of significance. No photographs adorned the walls, no military memorabilia filled the shelves, nothing that might prompt questions about a past she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. The bookshelves lining her walls served as both camouflage and comfort, filled with volumes on everything from classical literature to aerospace engineering, the latter dismissed by visitors as an interesting hobby rather than professional expertise. She'd created this life deliberately after leaving Air Force Special Operations, building a fortress of normalcy brick by brick until even she sometimes forgot the woman she used to be. The library had become her sanctuary, a place where the most dangerous thing she handled was an overdue notice, and the only decisions with consequences involved children's story hour selections. Sophia, would you mind helping with the new aerospace display? You seem to know more about these models than anyone, asked Diane, the head librarian, gesturing toward boxes of donated model aircraft for their upcoming Reach for the Stars educational exhibit. Sure thing, Sophia replied, her hands moving with practiced restraint as she unpacked the models. She deliberately fumbled with a scale replica of an F-22 Raptor, though she could have assembled it blindfolded. Better to appear interested but amateur than reveal the instinctive familiarity that came from hundreds of flight hours in experimental aircraft. You know, my nephew's bringing his Air Force buddies to help with the exhibit next week, Diane continued. They're stationed at Whitehall Air Base. Might be nice for you to chat with people who share your interest in aviation. Sophia's hands momentarily stilled before resuming their work. That sounds nice, but I'll probably be busy with the children's reading program that day. Oh, I already asked Helen to cover that. You're always hiding in the children's section when we have guests. Time for you to be social, Diane said with the well-meaning persistence of someone who had no idea she was arranging Sophia's worst nightmare. Later that evening, as Sophia prepared dinner in her apartment, she found herself staring at the single locked drawer in her desk. Inside lay the only evidence of her former life, a classified pilot certification for aircraft that officially didn't exist, a small obsidian pin shaped like a raven in flight, the unofficial emblem of the 8th Special Operations Wing, known in whispered military circles as the Night Ravens, and a photo of her former squadron, faces blurred too. Protect identities. 5 years of careful anonymity potentially threatened by well-meaning Diane and her Air Force nephew. The thought made Sophia's stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. She'd left that world behind after the Terran extraction, the mission that saved 23 hostages and ended her career when political winds shifted overnight, transforming heroes into liabilities. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Calloway, the only person in Oakwood Heights who suspected there was more to the quiet librarian than books and reading recommendations. A retired Air Force intelligence officer who now ran the local Veterans Support Center. James had a knack for recognizing fellow service members trying to blend into civilian life. Meeting at VFW tonight. good speaker on transition resources. You should come. Sophia hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. James had been inviting her to veterans events for months, never explicitly acknowledging he knew her background, but persistent in his efforts to draw her into the community. She declined every invitation, preserving the careful distance she maintained from anything connected to her military past. "Can't tonight. Inventory at the library," she replied, the lie coming easily after years of deflection. James's response came quickly. "One day you'll run out of excuses, Hayes. Community helps, isolation doesn't." She set the phone down without responding, turning instead to the bookshelf where she kept her personal collection of aviation texts. Her fingers traced the spine of Advanced Tactical Flight Operations, a manual she'd actually helped write, though her name appeared nowhere in its pages. Sometimes she missed the cockpit with an ache so profound it felt physical, the ghost. Sensation of control sticks under her fingers. The instrument panel spread before her, the rush of adrenaline when executing maneuvers few pilots would attempt. The following morning, Sophia arrived at the library early, using the quiet hours before opening to prepare for the afternoon children's program. The simplicity of reading stories to wide-eyed kids had become one of her few genuine pleasures. Their uncomplicated enthusiasm for tales of adventure so refreshingly different from the real-world missions she'd flown. "Morning, Sophia," called Ethan Parker, the library's IT specialist, as he set up computers for the day. In his mid-20s with perpetually disheveled hair and an earnest demeanor, Ethan represented everything unmilitary, casual, chronically late and blissfully optimistic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You're here early," Sophia observed, arranging picture. Books on the reading circle table. Big day. Air Force guys coming to set up that flight simulator for the aerospace exhibit. "Need to make sure all the systems are compatible," he explained, his excitement evident. "Did you know they're bringing a full VR setup? Kids can experience what it's like to fly military aircraft." Sophia nodded politely while mentally calculating the quickest exit routes from the library. A simulator meant pilots who spoke a language she understood too well, who might notice when her knowledge exceeded that of an ordinary librarian with a casual interest in aviation. "Sounds impressive," she said neutrally. "It's supposed to be super realistic," Ethan continued, oblivious to her discomfort. "Though I bet these simulations are nothing like actually flying the real thing, right?" "I wouldn't know," Sophia replied. "The practice lie automatic after 5 years." By mid-afternoon, the library buzzed with activity as 3 Air Force officers in casual uniforms set up equipment in the community room. Sophia strategically positioned herself at the circulation desk, keeping her head down as she processed returns, her body language deliberately unremarkable. From her peripheral vision, she observed them, young, confident, moving with the distinctive bearing of military personnel that civilians rarely noticed, but she could identify instantly. "Ms. Hayes?" Diane approached the desk, accompanied by a young Air Force captain. "This is my nephew, Captain Mark Reynolds." "Mark, this is Sophia Hayes, our aviation enthusiast." Sophia rose, offering a polite smile and handshake that revealed nothing of her internal tension. "Nice to meet you. The exhibit looks fascinating." Captain Reynolds smiled with the easy confidence of someone who had never needed to hide his accomplishments. "Diane mentioned you have an interest in military aircraft. Do you have any favorites?" "Just a casual interest," Sophia deflected. "Mostly from books and documentaries." "Well, you should try the simulator we've set up. It's a simplified version of our training modules, but it gives civilians a taste of what it's like to handle a fighter jet." "I'll keep that in mind," she replied, already formulating excuses to avoid the demonstration. The last thing she needed was to sit in a simulator, where muscle memory might betray her carefully constructed civilian identity. As Sophia returned to shelving books in a distant corner of the library, she overheard Captain Reynolds and his colleagues discussing flight patterns and approaches. Their conversation, filled with technical jargon and operational terminology, tugged at something deep inside her, the part that remembered the exhilaration of pushing experimental aircraft to their limits, of executing precision maneuvers in conditions most pilots would consider impossible. "The system's glitching on the high-altitude simulation," one officer said, frustration evident in his voice. "The oxygen deprivation scenario keeps crashing. Probably because the atmospheric pressure differential calculation is incompatible with the visual rendering speed." Sophia murmured to herself, the analysis automatic after years of troubleshooting similar systems. "What was that?" Ethan asked, appearing beside her with a stack of technical manuals for reshelving. "Nothing," she replied quickly. "Just talking to myself." As the afternoon progressed, Sophia successfully maintained her distance from the Air Force demonstration, delegating tasks that would have put her in the community room to other staff members. By closing time, she had almost made it through the day without incident, almost. "We're having trouble with the simulator," Diane said, approaching Sophia as she prepared to leave. "Captain Reynolds and his team need to head back to base for an evening briefing, but they couldn't get the system fully operational. Ethan mentioned you might be able to help since you read so many technical manuals." Before Sophia could formulate an excuse, she found herself being ushered toward the community room where one young lieutenant was still working frustratedly with the simulator controls. "It's probably just a simple connection issue," Sophia said, deliberately downplaying her knowledge as she reluctantly approached the setup. The simulator was more sophisticated than she'd expected for a library demonstration, a modified version of actual training equipment with a realistic cockpit configuration and wraparound screens. The lieutenant moved aside as she examined the control panel, her fingers hovering cautiously above the switches. "The error message suggests it's a calibration issue, not a connection problem," she said, careful to sound like someone who had read about such systems rather than operated them. "Have you tried resetting the gyroscopic stabilization parameters?" The lieutenant looked at her with surprise. "That's actually a good call. The technical manual doesn't even mention that as a troubleshooting step." Sophia shrugged already, regretting her specific knowledge. "I read a lot." With reluctant expertise, she guided the lieutenant through the reset procedure, deliberately fumbling certain steps to maintain her cover while ensuring the system would function properly. When the simulator hummed to life, screens displaying a realistic cockpit view, the lieutenant smiled gratefully. "You sure you're just a librarian? You fixed that faster than our tech specialists usually do." "Just good at following instructions," Sophia replied, stepping back from the simulator as if it held no particular interest for her. "Will that be all? I need to lock up soon." "Actually," Diane interjected, "why don't you try it out? You helped fix it. You should get the first civilian test flight." Sophia felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "I really shouldn't. I'm not much for video games." "It's not a game," the lieutenant said. "It's a simplified version of our actual training modules. Completely different experience." With Diane and the lieutenant looking expectantly at her, Sophia realized that refusing would draw more attention than complying. Reluctantly, she slid into the simulator seat, the contoured cushions and control layout triggering an immediate sense of déjà vu. Her hands hovered above the controls, and she deliberately hesitated, playing the part of an uncertain civilian. "Just grab the stick like this," the lieutenant demonstrated, "and try to follow the on-screen instructions for a basic takeoff and level flight." Sophia nodded, taking the controls with feigned awkwardness while her body remembered the thousands of hours she'd spent in similar seats, flying aircraft that existed only in classified documents. The simulation began, and she forced herself to make small, amateur mistakes, overcorrecting turns, applying too much throttle, the kind of errors expected from someone who had never flown. Not bad for a first-timer, the lieutenant encouraged. Want to try something more challenging? I should really get going, Sophia began, but Diane's enthusiasm overrode her objection. Oh, go on, Sophia. When will you get another chance to fly a fighter jet? The irony of the statement almost made Sophia smile. Instead, she nodded reluctantly as the lieutenant loaded a more advanced scenario, a complex series of maneuvers through mountainous terrain. This one's pretty tough, he warned. Most civilian visitors can't complete it. Just do your best. The scenario began, and Sophia continued her charade for approximately 30 seconds, making believable amateur mistakes while navigating the virtual terrain. Then a simulated emergency appeared, engine failure in one turbine, requiring immediate compensatory action to prevent a crash. Without thinking, her hands moved with the practiced precision of thousands of hours of flight training. Her fingers danced across the controls, automatically executing the exact sequence required to stabilize the aircraft, compensate for the thrust asymmetry, and maintain controlled flight while preparing for emergency landing procedures. The lieutenant's jaw literally dropped as he watched her handle the emergency with textbook perfection, her movements so fluid and confident they couldn't possibly belong to someone who had just read about flying. Holy, he breathed, stopping himself from completing the expletive. Where did you learn to do that? Sophia froze, abruptly aware of her critical error. 5 years of careful anonymity potentially compromised by muscle memory she couldn't suppress. She pulled her hands from the controls as if they'd burned her. Beginner's luck, she said, rising from the simulator seat. And I've played flight video games before. The lieutenant shook his head slowly. That wasn't beginner anything. Ma'am. Those were textbook emergency procedures, executed perfectly. That's not something you pick up from video games. Diane looked between them, confusion evident on her face. Sophia, what's he talking about? Before she could formulate a response, the community room door opened and Captain Reynolds returned, accompanied by an older officer whose insignia identified him as a colonel. Sophia's blood ran cold as she recognized Colonel Victor Hargrove, former commander of Special Operations, Air Task Force, and one of the few people who would instantly recognize her despite the 5 years that had passed. Lieutenant Walker, are we ready for tomorrow's demonstration? Captain Reynolds asked, before noticing the tension in the room. Sir, you should see this civilian fly the simulator, the lieutenant replied, gesturing toward Sophia, who was already calculating the distance to the nearest exit. Colonel Hargrove's eyes shifted to Sophia, narrowing slightly as he studied her face. Recognition dawned slowly, then completely. Captain Hayes? He said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of classified operations and shared history. Sophia Hayes? The room fell silent. Diane looked between them in confusion. The lieutenant and Captain Reynolds exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the colonel's recognition of the unassuming librarian. Sophia stood perfectly still, her carefully constructed civilian identity crumbling around her. 5 years of anonymity ended with a simple simulator exercise and an unexpected reunion. You must be mistaking me for someone else, Colonel, she said evenly, though she knew the denial was futile. Hargrove's expression softened slightly. I don't think so. Not many people could handle that emergency protocol with such precision. He turned to the others. Would you give us the room, please? Captain Reynolds, secure the door. Once they were alone, Hargrove studied her with a mixture of disbelief and respect. 5 years without a trace. Some people thought you were dead. That was the point, Sophia replied, her posture subtly shifting as she abandoned the librarian persona and stood with the natural authority of an officer. A librarian, Hargrove said, almost smiling. I never would have guessed. You disappeared. Completely after Tehran. That was the agreement. Political convenience required a scapegoat, and I needed to disappear. Seemed like a fair exchange at the time. Hargrove nodded solemnly. Things have changed since then. The truth about Tehran eventually came out. Your actions saved those hostages and prevented an international incident. Sophia's expression remained neutral. Years of operational discipline preventing her from revealing the emotions churning beneath the surface. With all due respect, Colonel, why are you here? Surely not to reminisce about classified operations in a public library. Coincidence, actually. I'm reviewing training programs at Whitehall. He paused, studying her carefully. But now that I've found you, we should talk. The Night Ravens have been reactivated under new leadership. Your particular skill set is still extremely relevant, Hayes. The mention of her former unit sent an unexpected jolt through Sophia's carefully maintained composure. The Night Ravens, elite pilots selected for missions requiring extraordinary flying skills under impossible conditions, had been her family, her purpose before political fallout had scattered them to the winds. I'm a librarian now, she said firmly. That other life doesn't exist anymore. Hargrove's gaze remained steady. Is that really true? Because what I just saw in that simulator wasn't a librarian. That was one of the finest combat pilots this country has ever produced, responding instinctively to a crisis. Before Sophia could respond, a soft knock at the door preceded Diane's concerned face peering into the room. Everything okay in here? We need to lock up soon. Fine, thank you, Sophia replied, her librarian persona sliding back into place with practiced ease. The Colonel and I are just finishing up. After Diane withdrew, Hargrove handed Sophia a business card, my direct line. Think about what I said. The world still needs people with your skills, Hayes. Not just flying abilities, but judgment under pressure. Sophia took the card automatically, years of military courtesy overriding her reluctance. Good night, Colonel. As she walked home that evening, Sophia felt the weight of her past pressing down upon her. 5 years of carefully constructed anonymity threatened by a chance encounter and muscle memory she couldn't suppress. The Colonel's words echoed in her mind, stirring something she'd tried to bury, the knowledge that her skills were exceptional, that what she could do in an aircraft few others could match. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, the bookshelves that had once represented her new identity now seeming like props in an elaborate deception. She unlocked the desk drawer, removing the obsidian raven pin and rolling it between her fingers, feeling its familiar weight and contours. The Tehran mission had been impossible from the start. 23 diplomatic personnel held in a compound surrounded by anti-aircraft defenses, with extraction possible only through a narrow mountain corridor during a narrow weather window. When the primary extraction team was compromised, Sophia had flown an experimental stealth aircraft into airspace where American craft officially never ventured, landing on an improvised runway that barely qualified as a road and extracting all hostages without casualties. Then politics intervened. Someone needed to take responsibility for an unauthorized operation in restricted airspace. Someone's career needed to end so others could continue. Someone needed to disappear. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Calloway. Heard some Air Force brass recognized one of our local residents today. My office tomorrow, 0900. No excuses this time, Captain. Sophia stared at the message, surprised but not shocked that James had already heard. Military communities had always operated on intelligence networks that moved faster than official channels. For the first time in 5 years, she allowed herself to remember not just what she'd lost, but what she'd accomplished. The lives she'd saved, the missions she'd completed when failure seemed certain. The extraordinary skill that had made her a legend among people who themselves were exceptional. As the evening deepened into night, Sophia Hayes stood at the window of her apartment, looking out at the quiet streets of Oakwood Heights. The peaceful community had been her refuge, her hiding place, her sanctuary from a world that had once demanded everything she had to give. Tomorrow she would need to decide whether the quiet librarian would remain her only identity, or whether Captain Sophia Hayes of the Night Ravens might have more to contribute than book recommendations and children's story hours. Tomorrow everything might change. Sophia woke before dawn, her body still operating on military time despite 5 years of civilian life. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling, contemplating the abrupt collision of her carefully separated worlds. The colonel's business card sat on her nightstand where she'd placed it the night before, a simple rectangle of cardstock that somehow carried the weight of her former life. The morning routine that had anchored her civilian existence now felt performative, each action a conscious choice rather than habit. She dressed in her typical librarian attire, modest slacks, a burgundy blouse, practical shoes, but found herself standing straighter, her movements more precise than the deliberately unremarkable demeanor she'd cultivated. James Calloway's message had been clear. He knew, had probably always known, or at least suspected. His persistent invitations to veterans' events suddenly took on new meaning, not just community outreach, but recognition of a fellow service member trying to navigate civilian waters. At precisely 0900, Sophia entered the Veteran Support Center, a converted storefront 3 blocks from the library. The space was warm and inviting, nothing like the sterile military facility she remembered. Comfortable furniture, walls covered with artwork created by local veterans, resources displayed on accessible shelves. James sat at a desk in the back, his posture military straight despite the casual clothing. At 58, his hair had gone completely silver, but his eyes remained sharp and observant, the eyes of someone who had spent decades analyzing information and people with equal precision. "Captain Hayes," he said, rising to greet her. "Or do you prefer Ms. these days?" "Sophia is fine," she replied, closing the door behind her. "How long have you known?" James gestured for her to sit. "Suspected from the first time you came into the library 3 years ago. The way you move, the way you assess rooms upon entering, those habits don't disappear with discharge papers. Confirmed it yesterday when my former colleague Colonel Hargrove called, and you never said anything. Not my place." James shrugged. Every veteran has the right to define their own relationship with their service. Some wear it openly, others prefer privacy. I respect both approaches. Sophia studied the man across from her, recognizing the careful diplomacy of intelligence officers. "But now you've asked me here, because now you have a choice to make, and I might be able to help." James leaned forward. "Hargrove mentioned the Night Ravens have been reactivated. You're well informed for someone running a small town Veterans Center." James smiled slightly. "Intelligence officers never fully retire, Sophia. We just find different ways to serve." He paused. "The question is whether you want to serve again, and in what capacity." "I'm a librarian now," she said, the response automatic after years of repetition. "Are you?" James asked quietly. "Or are you a highly trained pilot with extraordinary skills who happens to be working in a library?" The distinction struck deeper than Sophia expected. For 5 years, she'd worked to believe the former, to make the quiet life a reality rather than a cover. But yesterday's simulator incident had revealed the truth she'd tried to deny. Some skills, some identities ran too deep to fully disappear. "What happened in Tehran wasn't your fault," James continued. "The political fallout was convenient for certain officials, but the truth eventually surfaced. Your actions saved lives. You seem to know a lot about a classified operation. As I said, intelligence networks persist beyond active service." James studied her carefully. "The real question is what you want, Sophia. Not what Hargrove wants, not what I might suggest, but what you actually want for your life going forward." Before she could formulate a response, James's phone rang. He checked the display and frowned. "I need to take this." "Excuse me a moment." He stepped outside, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts. The office walls were covered with photographs, veterans at community events, fishing trips, graduation ceremonies. People who had successfully integrated their military experience into civilian identities rather than compartmentalizing them as she had done. Her gaze fixed on one particular image, an older woman in her 60s, standing proudly beside a restored Vietnam-era helicopter, her expression reflecting not just nostalgia, but purpose. James returned, his expression serious. "That was Hargrove. There's a situation developing at Whitehall. He's asking for you specifically." "What kind of situation?" "Demonstration flight for an international delegation. Their primary pilot is ill, and the backup lacks experience with the experimental aircraft they're showcasing. It's a diplomatic priority." Sophia felt her pulse quicken despite herself. "There must be other qualified pilots. Not with your specific experience on the 15 to 61 platform." James watched her carefully. "This isn't combat, Sophia. It's a demonstration flight, the kind of mission that showcases skill without risk." "Every flight has risk," she replied automatically, the assessment ingrained from years of training. "True, but this is an opportunity to use your abilities without committing to anything long-term. A single flight, a specific need that matches your unique qualifications." Sophia stood, moving to the window that overlooked the quiet town that had been her refuge. Oakwood Heights had given her anonymity when she needed it most, a place to disappear when her identity had become politically inconvenient. The library had provided purpose of a kind, organizing information, helping patrons, reading to children. But had it ever truly satisfied the part of her that thrived on precision, on excellence, on pushing the boundaries of what was possible? "When?" she asked finally. "They need an answer within the hour. The demonstration is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Sophia nodded, decision crystallizing. "I'll need to speak with Diane about taking a personal day." James smiled slightly. "I took the liberty of calling her already. Said you were helping with a veteran's crisis. She was quite supportive." "Presumptuous of you." "Strategic planning," he corrected. "Creating options without commitment." 2 hours later, Sophia found herself passing through the security gates of Whitehall Air Base, her civilian ID replaced with a temporary military credential that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar against her palm. Colonel Hargrove met her at the administrative building, his expression a careful balance of professional detachment and genuine relief. "Thank you for coming, Hayes. I know this is unexpected." "Let's be clear, Colonel. I'm here for one demonstration flight because you have a specific need that matches my experience. This doesn't mean I'm returning to service." Hargrove nodded. "Understood. Though once you're back in the cockpit, you might find your perspective changes." He led her through the facility toward the hangars, past groups of uniformed personnel, who paid little attention to the civilian woman walking alongside a colonel. The anonymity was a relief after yesterday's revelation at the library. "The 1561 has undergone significant upgrades since you last flew it," Hargrove explained as they walked. "Enhanced navigation systems, improved thrust vectoring, more responsive control surfaces. But the fundamental handling characteristics remain similar." Sophia absorbed the information with professional interest, asking precise technical questions that revealed her expertise despite her civilian status. Each step toward the hangar felt like moving backward in time, returning to a version of herself she deliberately packed away. The massive hangar doors parted to reveal the aircraft, sleek, predatory lines painted in experimental gray rather than standard military markings. The 1561, Peregrine, was officially a high-altitude research platform. Unofficially, it was one of the most sophisticated stealth aircraft ever developed, capable of operations that conventional aircraft couldn't attempt. "She's been waiting for you," Hargrove said softly, watching as Sophia unconsciously stepped forward, her eyes tracking over the aircraft's contours with the appreciation of someone who understood its capabilities intimately. Captain Reynolds and Lieutenant Walker stood nearby, their expressions shifting from confusion to realization as they recognized the unassuming librarian from yesterday, now clearly in her element as she approached the advanced aircraft. "Captain Hayes will be conducting tomorrow's demonstration flight," Hargrove informed them, his tone making it clear this information was to be treated with discretion. "The librarian?" Lieutenant Walker blurted before catching himself. "I mean, yes, sir." Sophia allowed herself a small smile at his confusion. "I wasn't always a librarian, Lieutenant." For the next 3 hours, Sophia immersed herself in technical briefings, systems updates, and simulator sessions to reacquaint herself with the aircraft's handling characteristics. The transition was seamless, her body remembering what her mind had tried to forget: the precise pressure needed on control surfaces, the timing of maneuvers, the integration of multiple systems under demanding conditions. "Your proficiency ratings are still exceptional," commented the flight systems engineer after reviewing her simulator performance. "It's as if you never stopped flying." "Some skills don't deteriorate," Sophia replied, though she recognized the truth was more complex. This wasn't just muscle memory. It was returning to an identity that fit more naturally than the one she'd constructed in Oakwood Heights. That evening, she found herself in temporary officers' quarters, staring at the flight suit laid out for tomorrow's demonstration. The name patch read simply Hayes without rank designations, a diplomatic compromise for her civilian status. Her fingers traced the material, remembering the feeling of belonging that came with the uniform, the clarity of purpose that military service had provided. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Everything okay with the veterans crisis? We miss you at the library." The simple message highlighted the collision of her worlds. To Diane and the library staff, she was still Sophia, the helpful librarian who had taken an unexpected personal day. To the personnel at Whitehall, she was Captain Hayes, the near-legendary pilot whose skills were needed for a diplomatically significant demonstration. The disconnect was jarring. "All under control," she replied to Diane. "Back tomorrow afternoon." The half-truth came easily, though it left an unfamiliar taste of discomfort. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Captain Reynolds stood outside, his expression a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Colonel Hargrove thought you might want to review the demonstration flight plan," he said, offering a tablet. "Though from what I saw in the simulator today, you probably could improvise something more impressive than what we've planned." Sophia accepted the tablet. "Planning matters, Captain. Improvisation is for when plans fail." "That's not what the stories about the night ravens suggest," Reynolds replied, then immediately looked as if he regretted the comment. "I apologize. That was unprofessional. What stories have you heard?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious about how her former unit was perceived by the current generation of pilots. Reynolds hesitated before answering. "That the Ravens could fly missions other pilots wouldn't attempt. That you in particular had a reputation for accomplishing the impossible." He paused. "They still study the Tehran extraction in advanced tactical courses, though without naming the pilot." Sophia absorbed this information silently. She had never sought recognition, but hearing that her work had become a teaching tool provided unexpected satisfaction. "The stories always exaggerate," she said finally. "We were just pilots doing our jobs under difficult circumstances." "With respect, ma'am, what I saw in the simulator today wasn't just anything." Reynolds' expression was earnest. "Lieutenant Walker hasn't stopped talking about how you handled that engine failure scenario. Those kinds of instincts aren't common." After Reynolds departed, Sophia reviewed the demonstration flight plan. making mental notes of opportunities to showcase the aircraft's capabilities without revealing its classified features. The diplomatic delegation would see impressive maneuverability without understanding the tactical applications of those same movements. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams a mixture of library books spontaneously rearranging themselves, and night missions over territories where American aircraft officially never flew. She woke before dawn, her body instinctively preparing for flight operations, with a routine she hadn't practiced in 5 years, but remembered perfectly. The pre-dawn base hummed with purposeful activity as ground crews prepared aircraft and security. Personnel established perimeters for the visiting delegation. In the ready room, Sophia found herself falling naturally into pre-flight procedures, checking weather reports, reviewing flight plans, and conducting mental rehearsals of key maneuvers. "How does it feel?" Colonel Hargrove asked, appearing beside her with a cup of coffee that he offered as a peace gesture. "Like muscle memory," she admitted, accepting the coffee. "Familiar in ways I didn't expect. Some things become part of us, Hayes, no matter how long we set them aside." He studied her carefully. "The delegation arrives in 30 minutes. Any questions about the demonstration parameters?" "No, sir. I've reviewed the profile." "Standard. Showcase maneuvers with emphasis on handling characteristics rather than tactical applications." Hargrove nodded, then lowered his voice. "There's something you should know. Among the delegation is General Kazimir Volkov of the Russian Air Defense Force. He was involved in the Tehran situation from the other side." Sophia's expression remained neutral despite the jolt of adrenaline his words triggered. "Will he recognize me?" "Unlikely. All records of Night Raven personnel were purged from accessible systems. But he'll certainly recognize flying style. If you perform the same maneuvers you used during the extraction." "Understood. I'll modify accordingly." As Hargrove departed, Sophia processed this new information. The Tehran extraction had involved penetrating airspace where multiple nations had security interests, navigating through defense systems specifically designed to detect American aircraft. If Volkov had been involved in the Russian response, he would have witnessed the effectiveness of techniques that had bypassed their most sophisticated detection systems. The flight suit felt like a second skin as she prepared for the demonstration, adjusting straps and connections with practice. Efficiency. In the hangar, ground crews conducted final preparations on the 15-61, its sleek form gleaming under the powerful lights. "Aircraft is ready, ma'am," reported the chief mechanic, his expression revealing nothing of what he might think about a civilian woman piloting one of the military's most advanced aircraft. "Thank you, Chief," Sophia replied, conducting her own visual inspection with the thoroughness that had been drilled into her through thousands of flight hours. Beautiful work. Through the hangar doors, she could see the diplomatic delegation arriving, dark suits, military uniforms, the controlled chaos of high-level visitors being guided through security protocols. Among them walked a tall man with the distinctive bearing of Russian military leadership, his chest decorated with service medals that caught the morning light. General Volkov, the man who had coordinated air defense responses during the Tehran crisis, who had nearly intercepted her aircraft during the most critical phase of the extraction. The man who never learned the identity of the pilot who had evaded his most sophisticated tracking systems. Sophia completed her inspection and proceeded to the aircraft, awareness sharpening as she prepared to re-enter the world she had abandoned. The cockpit welcomed her like an old friend, instruments and controls positioned exactly where her body expected them to be. As she settled into the seat, adjusting it to her precise specifications, something shifted inside her, a reconnection with the person she had been before Oakwood Heights, before the library, before she became invisible. Ground crew secured her harness and completed final safety checks while Sophia established communications with the control tower. Each procedural step felt like returning to a familiar language, the technical terminology flowing naturally after years of disuse. Peregrine, this is control. You are cleared for demonstration profile. Delegation is in position at observation point Alpha. Control, Peregrine copies. Beginning demonstration sequence in 3 minutes. As the canopy sealed around her, Sophia took a moment to center herself, hands resting lightly on controls that responded to the slightest touch. 5 years ago, she had walked away from this life, believing her skills were no longer valued, her expertise no longer needed. Today, she would remind herself and others of what those skills actually meant. The 1561's engines ignited with a controlled power that vibrated through the airframe, the sound dampened by sophisticated engineering but still carrying the promise of extraordinary performance. Sophia taxied smoothly to the runway, each movement precise and economical, nothing wasted, nothing excessive. Peregrine, you are cleared for takeoff. Winds 5 knots from the northwest. Control, Peregrine. Rolling. The acceleration pressed her into the seat as the aircraft gathered speed, responding to her commands with immediate precision. At exactly the calculated velocity, she rotated smoothly, feeling the moment when gravity released its hold, and the XV-61 became fully airborne, ascending at a rate that conventional aircraft couldn't match. Below, the delegation watched as the experimental aircraft climbed steeply into the morning sky, its profile shifting as control surfaces adjusted to Sophia's commands. She executed the planned demonstration sequence with textbook perfection. High G turns, rapid acceleration and deceleration, stability assessments at various altitudes. But as the demonstration progressed, something unexpected happened. The technical perfection of executing prescribed maneuvers gave way to something more personal, more expressive. Sophia began to fly not just with precision, but with the distinctive style that had made her legendary among those who understood aircraft capabilities, a blend of technical mastery and intuitive understanding of how to extract maximum performance from advanced systems. Peregrine, be advised you're deviating from the demonstration profile, came the controller's voice, tension evident despite professional composure. Sophia checked her position and parameters. She was well within safety margins, just operating at the edges of the aircraft's performance envelope rather than the conservative center of its capabilities. Control, Peregrine is demonstrating enhanced maneuvering characteristics as requested by Colonel Hargrove. All systems nominal. This was a half-truth. Hargrove had made no such request, but Sophia had recognized the opportunity to showcase what the aircraft and its pilot could really do. Not the scripted performance of a demonstration pilot, but the authentic capabilities of someone who had flown similar missions when lives depended on the outcome. At the observation point, General Volkov watched with increasing intensity as the aircraft performed maneuvers that seemed to defy conventional aerodynamics. His expression shifted from professional interest to focused recognition as Sophia executed a particular sequence, a rapid descent followed by terrain-hugging acceleration, and an unconventional use of thrust vectoring to change direction without telegraphing the intention. It was a signature maneuver, one she had developed specifically for the Terran extraction to evade tracking systems. A maneuver that only one pilot had ever successfully executed in operational conditions. Remarkable aircraft, commented the American general standing beside Volkov. One of our most advanced research platforms. The aircraft is impressive, Volkov replied in accented English. But it is the pilot who commands my attention. Few could handle such a machine with that level of intimacy. In the cockpit, Sophia felt a freedom she had forgotten existed, the pure joy of pushing boundaries, of operating at the edge of possibility, of expressing herself through the perfect marriage of human skill and mechanical capability. This wasn't just flying. It was artistry through technical excellence. As she completed the final sequence and banked toward the landing approach, Sophia realized something fundamental had shifted inside her. The librarian identity she had cultivated for 5 years suddenly felt like the disguise, while the pilot, executing precision maneuvers, felt like her authentic self re-emerging after a long absence. The landing was flawless, the 1561 touching down precisely on the designated markers with minimal speed correction required. As the aircraft taxied toward the hangar, Sophia noticed the delegation moving toward the reception area where pilots traditionally met with observers after demonstration flights. Colonel Hargrove's voice came through her headset on a private channel. "Hayes, Volkov recognized something in those maneuvers. I'm redirecting you through the secondary maintenance bay to avoid direct contact with the delegation." "Understood," she replied, adjusting her taxi route accordingly. "Was the demonstration satisfactory?" "More than satisfactory," Hargrove replied, a hint of amusement in his voice, "though considerably more revealing of the aircraft's capabilities than we had planned. We'll discuss that later." As ground crew secured the aircraft, Sophia removed her helmet and took a moment to absorb what had just happened. For 37 minutes, she had reconnected with the self she had buried under library books and community programs. The adrenaline still hummed through her system, alongside something deeper, a sense of alignment, of pieces fitting together in ways they hadn't in 5 years. Captain Reynolds met her as she exited the aircraft, his expression a mixture of awe and professional respect. "That was... I don't even have words, ma'am. I've never seen anyone fly like that." "The aircraft does most of the work," Sophia deflected, though they both knew this wasn't true. "The delegation is extremely impressed. Especially the Russian general. He kept asking questions about the pilot." Sophia nodded, processing this information. "Colonel Hargrove is handling the diplomatic side. I'm just the demonstration pilot." As she changed out of the flight suit in the ready room, returning to her civilian clothes, Sophia found herself reluctant to complete the transformation back to anonymous librarian. The person who had just executed those maneuvers wasn't someone who could be contained within the quiet life she'd constructed in Oakwood Heights. Her phone displayed 3 missed calls from the library. Reality intruding on the moment of reconnection. Tomorrow she would need to return to shelving books and organizing reading programs, pretending that today never happened, that the person who had commanded that aircraft was someone else entirely. But as she prepared to leave the base, Colonel Hargrove intercepted her with an expression that suggested complications had developed. "We need to talk, Hayes," he said quietly. "General Volkov has requested a meeting with the demonstration pilot. He claims to recognize the flying style from an incident 5 years ago." Sophia felt her carefully constructed worlds colliding with increasing force. "That's not possible. All records were purged." "Not all memories, apparently." Hargrove studied her carefully. "The question is whether Captain Sophia Hayes is ready to emerge from the shadows, or if the librarian from Oakwood Heights needs to disappear again." The choice crystallized before her: continue hiding from her past and her capabilities, or acknowledge the truth that today had made undeniable. The quiet librarian had always been the disguise, and the extraordinary pilot had always been her authentic self. Colonel Hargrove led Sophia to a secure conference room in the administrative building, its windows tinted to prevent observation from outside. The space contained a single table with 4 chairs, a digital display on one wall, and absolutely nothing that could be used to record conversations. A room designed for discussions that officially never happened. "I can still decline this meeting," Sophia said as they walked. "Return to Oakwood Heights, continue my life there." Hargrove glanced at her. "You could. But would that life satisfy you now after today?" The question struck deeper than he likely intended. The exhilaration of the flight still pulsed through her system, a reminder of what genuine passion felt like after years of carefully modulated contentment. "What does Volkov want?" she asked instead of answering. "He hasn't specified." But if he recognized your flying style from Tehran, his interest isn't casual. Hargrove paused outside the conference room. I've arranged for the base commander and myself to be present during any interaction. This isn't a private conversation. Sophia nodded, appreciating the safeguard. Let's get it over with. Inside the room, two men waited. Colonel Mitchell, the base commander, stood beside the digital display, reviewing what appeared to be footage from her demonstration flight. General Volkov sat at the table, his posture military precise despite the casual setting, his expression revealing nothing as she entered. Ms. Hayes, Colonel Mitchell greeted her formally, maintaining her civilian status for the record. Thank you for accommodating this unexpected request. Volkov rose, studying her with the calculating gaze of someone reconciling new information with existing intelligence. At 60, his face showed the weathering of decades of military service, but his eyes remained sharp with the same precision she'd evaded 5 years earlier. Captain Hayes, he said, deliberately using her military rank. Or do you prefer another title now? Miss Hayes is fine, she replied evenly, taking the seat across from him. I understand you requested this meeting, General. Volkov smiled slightly. 5 years ago, an American aircraft penetrated a secure airspace extraction corridor that my systems were specifically designed to protect. The pilot executed maneuvers that our most sophisticated tracking technology could not anticipate. He gestured toward the display showing her demonstration flight. Today, I witnessed those same maneuvers again. The signature is unmistakable. Sophia maintained neutral eye contact, neither confirming nor denying his implication. Flight techniques are taught and shared among pilots. Similar methodologies often develop independently. Perhaps, Volkov conceded. But the particular combination of thrust vectoring and terrain utilization you demonstrated today matched exactly the pattern that allowed 23 diplomatic personnel to be extracted, against impossible odds. His expression shifted to something approaching respect. It was a masterful performance, both 5 years ago and today. The conversation had entered dangerous territory. Official acknowledgement of the Tehran operation remained classified, and international recognition of American involvement had been diplomatically denied at the highest levels. General, Colonel Mitchell interjected, I'm sure you understand that speculative connections to classified operations are not appropriate for this discussion. Volkov waved a dismissive hand. We are all professionals here, Colonel. The diplomatic fiction has served its purpose, but among those who understand such matters, reality is acknowledged. He focused on Sophia again. I lost a significant wager because of you, Captain Hayes. I had assured my colleagues that no pilot could navigate that corridor under those conditions. You proved me wrong in most impressive fashion. Sophia felt the conversation shifting from potential threat to something unexpected. You're not here to make accusations about treaty violations? That diplomatic unpleasantness was resolved years ago. Volkov leaned forward slightly. I am here because I wish to understand how you thought about that problem. The psychological approach that allowed you to see possibilities where our analysts saw only impossibility. The request was so unexpected that Sophia took a moment to process it. Volkov wasn't seeking confirmation of violations or looking to create diplomatic incidents. He was professionally curious about the mindset that had defeated his systems. Your defensive grid was mathematically perfect, she said finally, speaking as one professional to another. Conventional approaches would have triggered detection at multiple points. Precisely. Yet you found a path where none should have existed. Perfect systems are designed against anticipated threats, Sophia explained, finding herself engaged despite her caution. The vulnerability is always in the assumptions about what an opponent will attempt. Volkov nodded, genuine interest evident in his expression. You exploited the psychological blind spot rather than a technical one. We assumed no pilot would attempt terrain-hugging approaches at those speeds, with those visibility conditions. Assumptions create opportunities. Sophia agreed. In my experience, what seems impossible often isn't. It's just outside conventional thinking. For the next 40 minutes, the conversation continued in this vein, a technical discussion between professionals about theoretical approaches to seemingly insurmountable challenges. Nothing explicitly confirmed classified operations yet. Understanding flowed between them in the language of hypotheticals and theoretical scenarios. As the meeting concluded, Volkov rose with formal military courtesy. "It has been enlightening, Ms. Hayes. Your perspective on these theoretical matters is most valuable." He paused, then added something unexpected. "If I might offer a personal observation, talents such as yours are rare. To set them aside completely would be a loss not just to your country, but to the advancement of what is possible in aviation." After Volkov departed with Colonel Mitchell, Sophia remained seated, processing the surreal interaction. "That was not what I expected," she said to Hargrove. "Volkov is old-school military. For him, professional respect transcends political boundaries." Hargrove sat across from her. "He's right, you know, about your talents being too valuable to shelve." "Completely. I left because political expediency required a scapegoat," Sophia reminded him. "Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed," Hargrove countered. "The officials who orchestrated your departure are gone. The truth about Tehran eventually surfaced through diplomatic channels. Your actions are now recognized as having prevented an international crisis rather than creating one." Sophia absorbed this information silently. For 5 years, she'd believed her departure was permanent, her skills no longer wanted. The possibility of return had never entered her planning. "What exactly are you suggesting, Colonel?" "Options. Hayes, not an ultimatum." Hargrove's expression softened slightly. "The Night Ravens are being re-established with a new operational focus. Not combat missions, but testing advanced systems and training the next generation of specialized pilots. Your experience would be invaluable in that context." "As what? A test pilot? An instructor?" "Both, potentially." "Your choice." "Full reinstatement with appropriate rank adjustments for time served. Or a civilian contractor position with flexible scheduling if you prefer to maintain your life in Oakwood Heights." The offer hung between them, unexpected and compelling. Before she could formulate a response, Sophia's phone buzzed insistently, the library calling for the 4th time that day. "I need to take this," she said, stepping away from the table. "Diane has been trying to reach me." "Of course." Sophia answered to find not Diane but Ethan, the IT specialist, his voice tight with tension. "Sophia, thank God. We've been trying to reach you all day." "What's wrong, Ethan?" "There's been a fire at the library. Electrical problem in the old wiring. Everyone's okay, but the children's section and part of the reference area are damaged. Diane's organizing an emergency community meeting to coordinate repairs and temporary relocation of services." The news struck with unexpected force. The sanctuary she'd created for herself, literally damaged while she reconnected with her former life. The symbolism wasn't subtle. "I'll be there as soon as I can," she promised, ending the call and turning back to Hargrove. "I need to go. There's a situation at the library." Hargrove nodded understanding. "My offer remains open. Hayes, take whatever time you need to consider it. The Ravens would benefit from your expertise, but the decision needs to be right for you." The drive back to Oakwood Heights gave Sophia time to process the day's cascading revelations. The exhilaration of returning to the cockpit, Volkov's unexpected professional respect, Hargrove's offer of reinstatement, and now the library fire, each event pushing her toward reconsidering the careful separation she'd maintained between her past and present. The library parking lot was filled with community members when she arrived. people carrying boxes of donated supplies and offering assistance. Diane coordinated efforts from the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, her normally perfect hair disheveled. From stress and smoke exposure. "Sophia," she called, genuine relief in her voice. "Thank goodness, we've been so worried." "I came as soon as I heard," Sophia replied, surveying the damage visible through the library's windows. Charred shelving in the children's section. Water damage extending into the reference area. Community members forming a human chain to salvage books and materials. "It's awful," Diane said, emotion cracking her voice. "All those beautiful children's books, the reading circle furniture, everything we built for the summer programs." "Books can be replaced," Sophia assured her, professional crisis management instincts taking over. "No one was hurt. That's what matters. What do you need from me right now?" Diane handed her a section of the clipboard list. "We're coordinating temporary relocation options for critical services. The community center can take some programs, but we need someone to oversee the Children's Reading Initiative until repairs are completed." For the next several hours, Sophia worked alongside community volunteers, her mind compartmentalizing the day's experiences as she focused on immediate needs. She organized salvage teams, coordinated with local businesses offering temporary space, and helped assess damage to the collection. As evening approached, she found herself in the partially damaged reference section, carefully removing water-affected materials. The aerospace books she'd maintained were mostly unharmed, protected by their position on higher shelves. "Quite a day for you," came James Calloway's voice behind her. He stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, evidence of smoke and water on his clothes from joining the volunteer efforts. "You could say that," Sophia agreed, setting aside a damaged atlas. "How much do you know?" "Enough." James moved to help with the heavy reference volumes. "Hargrove called, said you flew beautifully. It felt—" Sophia paused, searching for the right word. "True, like finding something essential I'd forgotten was missing." James nodded understanding. He also mentioned an offer. "Reinstatement. Or contractor position. News travels fast in intelligence circles. Only when it matters." James studied her face. "What are you thinking?" Sophia gestured around the damaged library. "I'm thinking that the quiet life I built here just went up in smoke while I was reconnecting with who I used to be. The timing feels significant. Or just coincidental." James countered. "The question isn't about symbolism. It's about where you can contribute most meaningfully." As they worked, Ethan appeared with bottled water for the volunteers, his expression brightening when he spotted Sophia. "There you are. Everyone's been talking about how you fixed that Air Force simulator yesterday. The rumors are getting wild. Someone said you used to be a test pilot or something." Sophia exchanged glances with James. The carefully constructed anonymity was unraveling quickly. "People exaggerate, Ethan," she deflected. "I just know a bit about technical systems." "Well, whatever you know, it's pretty impressive. Lieutenant Walker came back this afternoon looking for you. Sav, they wanted to thank you properly for your help." After Ethan left, James raised an eyebrow. "Your cover identity is deteriorating rapidly. Might be time to decide who Sophia Hayes really is, before others define it for you." The community response continued well into the evening, with local restaurants delivering food for volunteers and neighboring towns offering to loan materials until repairs could be completed. Throughout it all, Sophia found herself watching the interaction of community members with new perspective, people coming together around shared purpose, each contributing according to their abilities. Around midnight, as the immediate crisis stabilized, Diane found Sophia cataloging salvaged children's books in a makeshift workspace. "You should go home and rest," Diane said, exhaustion evident in her voice. "You've done more than enough for today." "I'm almost finished with this section," Sophia replied. her methodical approach to the task revealing the same precision she applied to flight operations. Diane studied her with newfound curiosity. "Sophia, can I ask you something? Those Air Force officers yesterday, they seemed to recognize you. And today you disappear for a veterans crisis. Then Lieutenant Walker returns asking specifically for you." She paused. "Is there something about your background I should know?" The question represented exactly the situation Sophia had worked for 5 years to avoid: personal interest in her history, questions about her past, attention focused on the person rather than the role she performed. "I helped with their simulator," she replied carefully. "Technical problems interest me." "That's not really an answer," Diane noted gently. "We've worked together for 3 years, and I realize I know almost nothing about you before you came to Oakwood Heights." The moment stretched between them, an opportunity for honesty or continued deflection. Before Sophia could decide which path to take, James appeared in the doorway. "Diane, the mayor's looking for you. Something about emergency funding approval." After Diane departed, Sophia gave James a grateful nod. "Timely intervention." "Just buying you time to make your own decisions," he replied. "But these questions won't stop now." The Sophia Hayes who fixed aviation simulators and knows aircraft systems intimately is becoming visible to people who previously saw only the quiet librarian. That night, Sophia returned to her apartment above Riverside Bookstore, the events of the day swirling through her mind as she attempted to process everything that had happened. The exhilaration of the morning flight remained vivid, the sense of operating at her highest capacity, using skills honed through thousands of hours of training and experience. She unlocked the desk drawer that contained the remnants of her military career, removing the obsidian raven pin and the classified pilot certification. For 5 years, these items had represented a closed chapter, artifacts from a life she believed was permanently behind her. Now they seemed like connection points between separated parts of herself that had never truly been distinct. Her phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Hargrove. "Decisions don't have to be binary. Hayes, integration rather than separation might be worth considering." The message resonated with thoughts already forming in her mind. Perhaps the fundamental error had been in believing she needed to be either Captain Hayes or Sophia the librarian, that these identities couldn't coexist within the same person, informing and enriching each other rather than competing for dominance. The following morning, Sophia arrived at the library early, finding Diane already coordinating with insurance adjusters and restoration specialists. The damage assessment was proceeding, with initial estimates suggesting at least 2 months of repairs before normal operations could resume. "We're going to need everyone to take on additional responsibilities during the transition," Diane explained as they reviewed recovery plans. "The community center can accommodate basic services, but space is limited." "What about the children's reading program?" Sophia asked, thinking of the young faces that gathered eagerly each week for stories and activities. "That's actually our biggest challenge. We need someone to coordinate with schools and parents, develop a mobile program, until we're back in operation." A plan began forming in Sophia's mind, not a choice between separate lives, but a synthesis that might serve multiple purposes simultaneously. "I might have a solution," she said carefully, "but it would require some flexibility in my schedule." "Here," Diane looked up with interest. "What are you thinking?" "A partnership with Whitehall Air Base. They have an educational outreach mandate and facilities that could accommodate our children's programs." Sophia paused. "I have contacts there who might be willing to help, especially if we incorporate aerospace education elements." "That's unexpected," Dan said, "but potentially brilliant. How would this work with your library duties?" "That's the flexibility part," Sophia admitted. "I've been offered a position at Whitehall, part-time technical consulting that would complement rather than replace my work here." Understanding dawned in Diane's expression. The Air Force officers who recognized you. This connects to your background, doesn't it? Sophia took a deep breath, choosing limited honesty over continued concealment. Yes, before coming to Oakwood Heights, I worked in military aviation. The technical knowledge is still valuable, particularly for training programs. Rather than the invasive questions Sophia had feared, Diane's response was practical and supportive. This could actually work beautifully for everyone. You'd be our liaison with Whitehall for the children's program while continuing reduced hours here during rebuilding. The base gets your expertise, we maintain our community services, and you get to use all your skills. The simplicity of Diane's acceptance was unexpected after years of anticipating complications if her background became known. Perhaps the careful separation she'd maintained had been unnecessary. People were often more accepting of complexity than she'd given them credit for. That afternoon, Sophia met with Colonel Hargrove at a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between Oakwood Heights and Whitehall Air Base. The casual setting removed the conversation from official military context, making it a discussion between professionals rather than a formal negotiation. I've been considering your offer, Sophia began after they were seated with coffee. And? Hargrove prompted when she paused. I'm interested in a hybrid arrangement. Civilian contractor status with flexible scheduling that allows me to maintain my position at the library. Hargrove nodded thoughtfully. That could work. What specific role are you envisioning? Advanced Systems Consultant and Instructor. For specialized flight operations, Sophia replied, the terminology feeling natural after years of disuse. Focus on the training and development aspects rather than operational deployments. The Night Ravens need exactly that expertise, Hargrove agreed. We have pilots with technical proficiency, but limited understanding of how to apply those skills in non-standard situations. I also want to establish an educational partnership between Whitehall and Oakwood Heights Library, Sophia continued. The library suffered fire damage and needs temporary space for children's programs. The base has facilities and an outreach mandate that could create mutual benefits. Hargrove's expression showed genuine approval. Creative solution, Hayes, serves multiple purposes simultaneously while bridging your separate worlds. Integration, rather than separation, Sophia acknowledged, referencing his text message. They spent the next hour outlining practical details, security clearance reactivation, scheduling parameters, facility requirements for the educational partnership. Throughout the discussion, Sophia felt a growing sense of alignment, as if puzzle pieces were finally fitting together after years of being forced into incorrect positions. There's one more thing, Hargrove said as their meeting concluded. The 1561 program needs an experienced pilot for ongoing development. Your demonstration flight yesterday showed you haven't lost your touch. Test flights would need to be scheduled around library commitments, Sophia stipulated. Of course, the aircraft will be available when you are. Hargrove hesitated, then added, Hayes, I want to acknowledge something. What happened 5 years ago, the political fallout from Tehran, was handled poorly. You deserved better than being forced into civilian anonymity. It served its purpose, Sophia replied, surprising herself with the lack of bitterness in her voice. I discovered aspects of myself I might never have explored otherwise. Still, the record should reflect your actual contributions. I have initiated paperwork to amend your service documentation accordingly. The acknowledgement meant more than Sophia had expected. Not for recognition, but for the simple justice of truth being officially acknowledged after years of calculated omission. 2 weeks later, Sophia stood in a converted hangar at Whitehall Air Base, surrounded by 20 excited children from Oakwood Heights Elementary School. The space had been transformed into a combination reading room and aerospace education center. with comfortable seating areas nestled among interactive exhibits on flight principles and space exploration. Today we are going to learn how airplanes stay in the sky. Sophia explained to her rapt audience her librarian's skill at engaging young minds, now complemented by technical knowledge she no longer needed to disguise. Then we will read a story about the first people to fly across the ocean. Captain Reynolds and Lieutenant Walker assisted with the demonstration models showing children how wing shapes created lift and how control surfaces changed an aircraft's direction. The young officers had embraced the community outreach role with unexpected enthusiasm, discovering their own talents for explaining complex concepts to elementary students. From the observation area, James Calloway watched with evident satisfaction. He approached as the children moved to the reading circle for story time, supervised by the officers. "This seems to be working rather well," he commented. Both parts of Sophia Hayes finding expression simultaneously. "Integration rather than separation," she agreed. "Turns out people are quite capable of understanding that individuals contain multitudes. And the flying, how is that going?" Sophia could not suppress a smile. 3 test flights last week. The 15 to 61 is responding beautifully to the modifications we suggested. James studied her with the perceptive gaze that had first recognized her military background. "You look different, you know. Not just happier, more complete." "I feel more complete," Sophia acknowledged. "For years I thought I had to choose between lives, to be either the quiet librarian or the pilot with extraordinary skills. Turns out that was a false dichotomy. Most limitations are," James replied, "especially the ones we impose on ourselves." As the children gathered for their story, Sophia noticed Diane entering the hangar with Colonel Hargrove, both observing the successful integration of library services and military facilities with evident approval. "You have created something remarkable here," Diane said when they joined Sophia. "The waiting list for this program is already 3 weeks long." "It is a team effort," Sophia replied, acknowledging the officers working with the children. "Different skills, serving a common purpose." "Speaking of skills," Hargrove interjected quietly, "the Advanced Systems team has requested your input on the next generation guidance protocols. Whenever you are available." "Thursday morning works with my library schedule," Sophia confirmed. "I will review the preliminary designs before the meeting." As the conversation continued, Sophia felt the natural flow between her different roles. The technical expertise valued at Whitehall, the community service centered at the library, the educational bridge she had created between them. What had once seemed like separate lives now functioned as complementary aspects of a more authentic whole. Later that afternoon, as she prepared to leave the base, Sophia encountered General Volkov again. He was departing from a scheduled diplomatic meeting, his security detail waiting discreetly nearby. "Ms. Hayes," he greeted her with formal courtesy. "I understand you have found a way to utilize your considerable talents in multiple contexts." "Integration rather than separation," Sophia replied, the phrase becoming something of a personal mantra. Volkov nodded approvingly. "A wise approach. The world needs people who can bridge supposedly separate domains, technical expertise and human understanding, military precision and civilian creativity. The boundaries between those domains are more permeable than I once believed," Sophia acknowledged. "Indeed," Volkov offered a respectful nod before departing. "Perhaps that is the most valuable lesson for anyone with exceptional abilities, that they need not be confined to a single application." As Sophia drove back toward Oakwood Heights that evening, she reflected on the transformation of the past 3 weeks. The library repairs were progressing ahead of schedule, the children's programs at Whitehall had exceeded all expectations, and her technical contributions to the 15 to 61 program had already influenced the next generation of flight control systems. More importantly, the careful compartmentalization she had maintained for 5 years had given way to something more authentic, not a choice between separate identities, but an integration that allowed all aspects of her abilities to find meaningful expression. The quiet librarian had not disappeared. She had simply expanded to include the extraordinary pilot. She had always been creating something more complete than either identity alone could have achieved. 6 months after Sophia Hayes rediscovered her authentic self, the integration of her seemingly separate worlds had evolved from experimental compromise into a seamless reality. The library had reopened after extensive renovations, its children's section now featuring an expanded aerospace section that had become unexpectedly popular among young readers. The educational partnership with Whitehall Air Base had proven so successful that it continued as a permanent program with regular visits between the military facility and the community library. On this particular morning, Sophia stood in the library. On this particular morning, Sophia stood in the cockpit of the 1561, reviewing flight data from yesterday's test of modified control surfaces. The aircraft responded to her touch with the same precision that had made her legendary among specialized pilots, but now those skills serve development rather than operations, pushing the boundaries of what future aviators might accomplish. The responsiveness at high altitude is still lagging by approximately 0.3 seconds. She noted to the engineering team gathered around the aircraft. Negligible in standard flight profiles, but potentially critical in edge case scenarios. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the lead systems engineer, made notes on his tablet. We can modify the activation threshold for the secondary control array. Would you be available to test the adjustments on Thursday? Sophia checked her digital calendar, where library commitments and flight operations now coexisted in a carefully balanced schedule. Thursday works. I have story time at 10 o'clock, but I can be here by 1300 for pre-flight preparation. No one on the engineering team found this juxtaposition strange anymore. The exceptional test pilot, who also read picture books to kindergartners. They had come to appreciate that the same precision and attention to detail that made her valuable in the cockpit also made her effective in community service. Perfect, Jackson confirmed. The modifications will be complete by then. As the technical briefing concluded, Captain Reynolds approached with a message from Colonel Hargrove. The Colonel requests your presence at the command center, ma'am. Something about a special consultation. Sophia thanked him and made her way across the base, nodding to personnel, who now greeted her with the respect accorded to someone whose contributions were recognized rather than hidden. Her civilian contractor status had evolved into something unique, neither fully military nor typically civilian, but a specialized role that utilized her particular combination of experience and skills. Colonel Hargrove waited in the secure briefing room along with 2 officers Sophia did not recognize. Their insignia identified them as Navy intelligence, their expressions revealing nothing about the purpose of the meeting. Hayes, thank you for joining us, Hargrove greeted her formally. This is Commander Ellis and Lieutenant Commander Patel from Naval Intelligence Special Projects Division. Sophia acknowledged them with a professional nod. Gentlemen, how can I assist? Commander Ellis activated the room's security protocols before speaking. Ms. Hayes, we understand you have extensive experience with certain specialized extraction methodologies, particularly in environments where conventional approaches would be compromised. The phrasing immediately signaled classified territory. Sophia glanced at Hargrove, who gave a subtle nod of confirmation that this consultation had been properly authorized. I have relevant experience, she acknowledged carefully. Though I should note my current role is advisory and developmental, not operational. Understood, Ellis continued. We are not requesting operational involvement. We need expert consultation on a developing situation with time-sensitive parameters. Lieutenant Commander Patel brought up a satellite image on the secure display. Oceanographic research vessel Horizon is currently disabled in disputed waters. Engine failure and communications limitations. 18 civilian scientists and crew Members on board including 3 with medical conditions requiring attention within the next 72 hours. Sophia studied the image, her mind automatically calculating distances, evaluating approach vectors and identifying potential complications. Standard search and rescue would typically handle this type of situation. Under normal circumstances, yes, Ellis agreed. However, multiple regional actors have deployed naval assets to the area, each claiming jurisdictional authority. Conventional extraction methods would trigger territorial disputes that could escalate rapidly. The situation crystallized in Sophia's understanding, a humanitarian need complicated by geopolitical tensions, requiring a solution that couldn't follow standard protocols. You need an approach that allows extraction without creating the appearance of military presence in disputed territory, she summarized. Something that preserves both lives and diplomatic fictions. Exactly, Patel confirmed. When we described these parameters to Colonel Hargrove, he suggested you might have insights from previous experience with similar constraints. For the next 3 hours, Sophia worked with the intelligence officers, developing a comprehensive extraction methodology that drew on her experience with the Terran operation while adapting to the maritime environment. She designed approach vectors that minimized radar profiles, suggested specialized equipment modifications, and identified optimal extraction windows based on weather patterns and satellite coverage. This flight profile requires exceptional piloting skills, Ellis noted as they reviewed the completed plan. Do you have someone capable of executing these maneuvers? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, Sophia replied without hesitation. Night Raven's training program, top of her class in complex environment navigation. I've been working with her for 4 months. She can handle this. Ellis raised an eyebrow. You're not recommending yourself. My role is advisory now, Sophia reminded him. Besides, the objective should be developing capabilities that don't depend on specific individuals. Chun has the skills, and this operation will give her the experience. The recommendation reflected Sophia's evolved understanding of her contribution, not just applying her own exceptional abilities, but developing those capabilities in others who would carry the work forward. As the meeting concluded, Commander Ellis extended his hand. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Your insights may well save 18 lives while preventing an international incident. Keep me informed of the outcome, Sophia requested. And tell Commander Chun that steady pressure on them why. Secondary controls will compensate for the crosswind shear in the final approach. After the intelligence officers departed, Hargrove remained behind, studying Sophia with thoughtful consideration. You've changed, Hayes. How so? 6 months ago, you would have insisted on flying that mission yourself. Today, you're recommending someone else and focusing on developing their capabilities. Sophia considered this observation. Maybe I've realized that true expertise isn't just what you can do yourself, but what you can teach others to accomplish. The mark of a genuine leader, Hargrove noted approvingly. Speaking of which, we should discuss the expanded training program proposal. The Pentagon has expressed interest in your curriculum design for non-standard flight operations. As they walked toward Hargrove's office, Sophia's phone chimed with a message from Diane at the library. The regional education coordinator was visiting unexpectedly and wanted to discuss expanding the aerospace reading program to other libraries in the county. I need to head back to Oakwood Heights, Sophia explained. The education coordinator wants to discuss program expansion. Hargrove nodded understanding. We can continue this tomorrow. The training program isn't urgent. Actually, Sophia suggested, why don't you join me at the library? If we're talking about expanding educational initiatives, having both military and civilian perspectives would be valuable. The invitation represented the natural evolution of her integrated approach, bringing together separate worlds rather than moving between them in isolation. Later that afternoon, Sophia facilitated a discussion in the library's community room, where Colonel Hargrove, Diane, and the regional education coordinator explored possibilities for expanding the aerospace education program. The conversation flowed naturally between technical considerations, educational objectives, and community engagement strategies. What makes this program so successful, the coordinator observed, is how it bridges specialized knowledge and public accessibility. Most technical experts can't translate their expertise for general audiences, especially children. That's Sophia's particular talent, Diane commented. She understands both the technical complexity and how to make it meaningful to different audiences. The observation struck Sophia as profoundly accurate. Her value wasn't simply in her piloting skills or her library expertise, but in her ability to move between these worlds and create connections that enriched both. As the meeting concluded with plans for a county-wide expansion, Sophia noticed James Calloway waiting patiently near the reference section. His expression suggested he had something specific to discuss. "Successful meeting?" he asked as she approached. "Very. The aerospace program is expanding to 7 more libraries." Sophia studied his face. "But that's not why you're here." James smiled slightly, perceptive as always. "I received information about Operation Horizon." Sophia glanced around to ensure privacy before responding. "Already? The extraction isn't scheduled until tomorrow. It's been accelerated. Chun is preparing for deployment now." James hesitated before adding, "She specifically requested your presence during final preparation." The request was unexpected but understandable. Despite months of training, Commander Chun was facing her first high-stakes extraction mission with international implications. Having a mentor who had navigated similar challenges could provide valuable reassurance. "I'll head back to Whitehall now," Sophia decided. "Diane can handle the follow-up with the education coordinator." James nodded approval. "Sometimes our greatest contribution isn't what we do ourselves, but how we empower others to succeed." The observation echoed Sophia's earlier conversation with Hargrove, reinforcing the evolution in her understanding of purpose and impact. Back at Whitehall, Sophia found Commander Sarah Chun in the mission planning room, reviewing approach vectors and contingency protocols. At 32, Chun represented the new generation of specialized pilots, technically brilliant, methodically prepared, and selected specifically for her ability to handle non-standard operations. "Ms. Hayes," Chun acknowledged her arrival with evident relief. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to verify some calculations on the final approach segment." Sophia recognized the request for what it actually was. Not technical verification, but confidence reinforcement before a challenging mission. She remembered her own first extraction operation, the combination of technical preparation and psychological pressure that no simulation could fully replicate. "Let's review the entire sequence," Sophia suggested, pulling up a chair beside the younger pilot. "Not just the calculations, but the decision points and priority hierarchies." For the next hour, they walked through the mission profile step by step, Sophia sharing insights that weren't documented in any manual. How to recognize the precise moment when a theoretical contingency became an operational necessity. How to maintain situational awareness when multiple systems demanded simultaneous attention. How to trust trained instincts when analytical processing couldn't keep pace with developing circumstances. "The most important thing to remember," Sophia concluded, "is that the plan is just a starting point. Reality will introduce variables we can't anticipate. Your job isn't to follow the plan perfectly. It's to accomplish the mission by adapting intelligently to changing conditions." Chun absorbed this guidance thoughtfully. "How did you handle the uncertainty in Tehran when everything was unprecedented?" The question went to the heart of exceptional performance under pressure. Not just technical skill, but psychological resilience when facing situations beyond established protocols. "I focused on what remained constant," Sophia explained. "The physics didn't change, The aircraft's capabilities didn't change, and the core mission parameters didn't change. Everything else was adaptable. Chun nodded, understanding dawning in her expression. It's not about eliminating uncertainty. It's about determining which elements are fixed and which are flexible. Exactly. Uncertainty isn't the enemy, it's the environment. How you navigate it determines success. As Chun prepared for mission deployment, Sophia felt a profound sense of contribution that transcended her own operational accomplishments. The knowledge she'd gained through extraordinary circumstances was being transferred to the next generation of specialists, creating capability that extended beyond any individual career. Colonel Hargrove joined her in the observation room as Chun departed for final equipment preparation. "She's ready," he commented. "Your mentorship has been invaluable." "She was already exceptional," Sophia noted. "I just helped her recognize capabilities she already possessed." Sometimes that's the most important contribution we can make, helping others see their own potential. Hargrove studied her thoughtfully. "You've found your balance, haven't you? Between the library and this work? They're not as separate as I once believed," Sophia replied. "Both involve translating specialized knowledge into accessible understanding. The contexts differ, but the core skills are remarkably similar." The mission launched at 0300, with Commander Chun piloting the modified extraction aircraft toward the disabled research vessel. Sophia remained in the secure operations center, monitoring progress but not intervening unless specifically requested. This was Chun's mission to execute her opportunity to apply both training and natural ability to a real-world challenge. The retrieval of medical priority personnel was completed without incident, and the remaining scientists and crew were being transferred when the first complication arose. "Unidentified vessel approaching from Sector 7, reported the tactical officer. Profile consistent with Regional Maritime Patrol. Current trajectory will intersect extraction zone in approximately 12 minutes. The development represented exactly the type of uncertainty that distinguished real operations from simulations, an unplanned variable requiring immediate adaptation without compromising core mission parameters." Sophia watched as Chun processed the information and adjusted her approach, shifting the extraction timeline while maintaining the critical cover profile. The decision demonstrated both technical competence and the situational judgment that could not be taught through standard training methods. "She is handling it perfectly," Hargrove observed quietly. "She is recognizing which elements are fixed and which are flexible," Sophia agreed. "Adapting the method while preserving the objective." The extraction continued with modified protocols, Chun adjusting in real time to the evolving situation. When weather conditions created additional visibility challenges, she incorporated techniques Sophia had demonstrated months earlier during training exercises, approaches that were not documented in any manual, but had proven effective in similar conditions. By 0742, all 18 scientists and crew members had been safely extracted. The specialized aircraft was returning along a deliberately indirect route to mask its origin point, and the geopolitical fiction of non-military involvement remained intact. Commander Chen had accomplished her mission with the same precision and adaptability that had once made Sophia a legend among specialized pilots. "Mission complete," announced the operations officer, as tracking confirmed the aircraft's return trajectory. "All objectives achieved with no compromising incidents." The operations center staff exchanged quiet congratulations, professional satisfaction, rather than dramatic celebration. These were people who understood the value of operations that officially never happened, accomplishments that would never appear in public records, but had tangible impact on real lives. Sophia felt a deep satisfaction that transcended personal accomplishment. The knowledge that her experience had contributed to developing capabilities that would continue long after any individual career. By sharing what she had learned through extraordinary circumstances, she had multiplied its impact beyond what she could have accomplished alone. 3 days later, Sophia conducted storytime at the library, reading to a circle of kindergartners about space exploration and the principles of flight. The children listened with rapt attention as she explained complex concepts in accessible language, their natural curiosity engaged by her genuine enthusiasm for the subject. Miss Sophia asked 5-year-old Emma during the question period, "Do you know how to fly airplanes for real?" The innocent question brought smiles from the parents, gathered at the back of the room, who had come to appreciate the special expertise their children's librarian brought to these educational sessions. "I do know how to fly," Sophia confirmed. Different kinds of aircraft require different skills, just like how reading different books helps us learn different things. "Could you teach me someday?" Emma asked, her expression serious. "When you are ready to learn, I would be happy to help you understand how flight works," Sophia promised. "The most important thing is believing you can learn things that seem difficult at first." The exchange captured the essence of what Sophia had come to understand about her own unique contribution, not just applying specialized skills, but creating pathways for others to develop their own capabilities, whether 5-year-olds discovering the principles of flight or specialized pilots mastering extraordinary operations. After the children departed, Diane joined Sophia in organizing the reading area. "You have changed our whole approach to children's education," she observed. "The aerospace program has become our most requested offering. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."